well, right? So first, if we can't see it, we can't address it. So we need to be able to see all facets. So with the normal MDR service, it only sees what happens on the endpoint, right? But we need to see, how did that come to be? How did that happen there? Because we don't want to stop and solve for that endpoint. We want to protect the entire organization, right? So we need to say, this happened. Let's get to containment where we can stop the activity for a moment, right? We want to pause that activity so that we can move forward with recovery and remediation. But we can't get to remediation, right, if we don't have identification and if we don't have containment, because it requires us to then have be able to determine root cause. If we can't determine root cause, we can't move forward with anything, right? We don't have anything. So that is our #1 goal with the Solis SOC, and that is what the MXDR service allows us to do with the Stellar Cyber platform. So identification, containment, and remediation allows us to do that. It allows us to eradicate and allow your organization to recover. And I'll say that because a cyber attack can be the difference between your organization existing today and no longer existing, right? Because there's no longer just a cost associated, there's a reputation associated as well, right? Because when you're attacked, people question, how did that happen? You know, to some extent, we know that these things could happen. When they get to the full extent, we want to make sure that you have policies in place that prevent that. And that's additionally what the remediation step does for you, right? Because we want to put in place policy-based recommendations, because we know that humans are always the weakest link in attacks being successful, right? So let's take a look here at, what's the difference between MDR and XDR, right? So let's take a quick look at MDR first. So as I mentioned before, MDR focuses primarily on the endpoint, the EDR solution, right? That's going to be your servers, your laptops, your desktops, and it's completely dependent on those solutions being fully deployed out on those endpoints. So if the agent isn't installed on a particular endpoint, it's tough to have visibility, right? So that goes back to attacks could be successful due to visibility. I have seen in the past attacks where very successful because initially the endpoint, it didn't have the agent on it, so we couldn't see the initial activity taking place, and then it proceeded to the next endpoint in which we were able to stop. But that just shows the impact that an endpoint monitoring could have. And then once again, more limited visibility, including looking at the network and being able to see IoT devices, Internet of Things devices. And then again, it only allows us to see the EDR data, so we can't pull in other data types to get, to make more sense of the picture. How did this happen? What are the details? Because when our analysts do an investigation, we want to have the full picture as much as possible. And then it's not that single pane of glass, right? So we'll have that EDR solution, and then there may be other platforms that you already have that assist with your security that you still have to do your own checks on as well, right? So, and that's what brings us to MXDR. That gives us a much more access to see that data. So MXDR, right? I know we have this further down, but I'll go ahead and say I love MXDR because it allows us to get the whole picture, right? It allows us to see from beginning to end where the attack is taking place and what are the proper containment and remediation steps we need to be able to take place. But the MXDR, it doesn't replace MDR because we still need to be able to view that endpoint data, right, to see what's happening on the endpoint. And we'll also pivot to those other network resource, firewall resource, web server resource to say, where did this originate from and what are the other policies we need to put in place to prevent that from happening, right? Maybe additional to the blocking that needs to take place on the endpoints, maybe we need to put in a firewall rule, right, to prevent any communication there, right? Because many times threat actors are just looking for the lowest hanging fruit, and we need to be able to keep them out before that activity takes place, right? This is that reducing the threat. And then with the MXDR solution, allows us to take in more data types. Steve's going to talk to you a little bit more about that. It allows us to see on-premises and cloud-based data, no matter the option that you have. That allows us, again, gives us additional insight and allows us to address those threats in a much quicker manner before they expand and grow. And then with an MXDR solution, for that same reason, it allows us to, automate much better for addressing those type of activities, right? So say we ingest your network devices, we could say, go ahead and put a block of this IP on your network device versus just at the endpoint levels. It gives you much well-rounded, and it'll also allow us to see in an incident, potentially if you have improper network segregation, right? So if an attack takes place on your guest network, doesn't impact your production network. So again, more visibility is the key here. And with that same reason, it gives the analyst a quicker ability to be able to determine that insightful information, help the customer get to closure, and remediate before there's any larger impact, right? So it could just be very minor. Always remember, there's an attack before the attack. Ransomware usually just takes a number of hours and usually a number of days, right? So when you have someone watching your environment 24/7, looking at all aspects of that, we can stop that attack before it grows, right? So additionally, with MXDR, there's a lot of options that you can have for what's delivered on that platform and what's available to you. Say if you have Office 365 and you want to be able to say, let's look at suspicious logins, right? You know, a lot of times attacks take place externally. They don't take place within the organization. They take place externally, right? So if we see a suspicious login, right, we can address that, but it'll also help us build that investigation to give us better identifications on how did we get here? How did this happen? So we can reverse step back and say how we can better learn and improve. So I think that's it for the initial part. I want to talk about MXDR and MDR. I'll hand it over to Steve and we'll continue this conversation. All right, thank you.
Okay, great. So thanks for inviting me here. I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to walk you through a couple of quick slides as well as a quick demo of the product itself. So let me get into here. And just, Shantae, can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Steve Salinas. I'm the head of product marketing here at Stellar Cyber. I've been on the vendor side in cybersecurity for almost 20 years, and I've been here at Stellar Cyber for just over 2 years. And I think what's interesting and what I like about what we're doing here is we're helping partners like Solis address one of the biggest issues that's really challenging for all cybersecurity practitioners, decision makers, is the complexity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why our solution, why we believe it's and we're getting a lot of traction and a lot of partners are selecting our platform to help drive their services. So let's take a look at what the platform includes. So when we look at XDR and what we call our XDR, there are a couple of different types of XDRs. Just really quickly, you have what are known as kind of closed XDRs or native XDRs, and this is an extension of a vendor's EDR product. And then you have an open XDR, and that's what we are. And what that means is that we are not tied to any one specific vendor. We don't require our own EDR to be in place. It's whatever products the customers or the organizations are using, we ingest data from those products. So that's what makes it open. We're vendor agnostic is one way to put it. So what this represents is just the broad swath of types of data type that we can ingest. And everything from the alerts, cloud activity, network activity, user behaviors. All of this data comes in, and the way that we start with that data is we do some normalization and enrich it, and then we store it in our data lake. And then now we also can store it in another data lake if an organization happens to be using another data lake. So that's a little bit about data management, but let's talk about what the actual platform delivers. So this is where when you look at XDRs and open XDRs, they're all slightly different. So what our product is built around, well, for one, it was an open XDR from the very beginning. It's not an extension of, as I mentioned, an EDR product. So at the top here, you see the different types of security applications. And so basically, said simply, what our platform delivers is of 8 or 9 different types of products that a partner or someone that's delivering security services might have had to go out and buy these individually. Well, we include those all in one platform. So next-gen SIEM, network detection and response, FIM, if you're not aware of that, that's file integrity monitoring. UEBA is behavior analytics. IDS is looking for threats across the network. We have a threat intelligence platform built in. We have response capabilities as well as a malware sandbox, all working in a case management framework. And then our newest addition is our Gen AI Copilot, which is taking advantage of the latest advancements in AI to enable security analysts to basically have a conversation with the platform. And I'll talk a little more about that later. It's all built on top of, so that is all running those security applications. And kind of the core of it, of the platform itself, is our threat detection and correlation capabilities. And it's a combination of machine learning based models. We have rules that we provide. We enable threat hunting as well. And then we have this graph ML, which I'll talk about more in a minute. Shantae, anything you want to add here?
I know it's excellent. This is once again going back to being able to see that full picture, right? Being able to see all of these data types, right, and allows us to quickly be able to determine how do we properly contain your threat and remediate you. So no, this is excellent.
So when you look at open XDRs, or I'll call them XDRs. So, and how you do investigations, traditionally investigations are based on alerts. And if you look at it, if you've ever run a SOC, if you've been in a SOC, you know there's usually a team that's dedicated to just alert triage, right? That's where the alerts come in, and they're kind of probably like tier 1 folks, and they determine, okay, this is a false positive, or this is something that needs to be pushed up the chain for someone maybe more senior to take a look at it. The problem is that doesn't really scale. There's just too many alerts that come in all the time. So what we are delivering is what we call a case-centric approach to cybersecurity. So what we're using are AI and ML models to, once we've identified and bring all that data in, we correlate it together and we create cases. Now these cases might include up to 50 different types of events, all in one case. So if you're thinking about it from a security perspective, a security analyst, instead of having to do individual alert triages, we are automating a lot of that process and providing a case, and we're going to take a look at it in the product in a minute, that a security analyst can essentially clear out a bunch of different alerts by working one investigation. And all those actions and the remediations and everything, as Shantae mentioned, around identifying, what is the scope and doing some containment and the actual remediation, all takes place in one screen.
Yeah, Stephen, that helps reduce a lot of the alert fatigue that security analysts often face. And then it also allows, those analysts as well as those senior analysts be able to say, where should we focus our attention? Where should we put our attention on these particular threats? And that could be based on severity, as well as how you have your ML model set up. You can say how to automatically correlate those alerts, right? Because we're going to have to correlate those alerts anyways. This is giving us a heads up, allows us to do that quicker. And then we can also associate events that maybe didn't produce alert in the platform. So yeah, this is excellent.
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of times, and I've talked with a lot of different security folks, and you get so much data comes in, right? A lot of it's noise, and a lot of the alerts, they might come in as low priority, low level, but if you start to add up a bunch of these lows together, guess what? You might end up with the medium or high type of attack, right? So that's what we're really doing here. We're bringing that view to the investigation. So I wanted to briefly talk before we get into the demo. How does the product work? So I've already talked about the different data that comes in. The first step is we normalize it. So that is really just basically applying a standard format. And we do that so that it really optimizes our ability to analyze and search across all these different types of data sources. Because as you know, every single different product you're using has a different data format, which is not great, but that's the way the world that we live in. So we normalize the data. And then what we're doing is we apply machine learning and deep learning to all of that data to detect these threats. And again, we're looking for advanced threats, things that are not, maybe aren't available to the naked eye, right? You really need to be able to look across different signals to identify, no, this is actually a threat. The next phase is, so once these threats are detected, we're using what's known as graph machine learning to do a correlation of activity. So this is actually putting together all these different actions and events into a single case. And then, as I mentioned, the latest use of AI in our platform, which LLM is large language model, or Gen AI, or you may have heard of like ChatGPT, things like that. So really, this is a conversational approach to investigations, to where the analyst can, instead of having to write